onto your page. So we are
live.
Welcome everybody to episode 26 of celebrating the brand ambassador. I can't believe I started this back in November, and it's been really exciting watching as the industry has been changing as we're going forward. Every single month it's been like a new development, which is a lot of fun. I feel really excited for us, and I feel bad because I know we're like 2 months ahead of everybody else. So sometimes our country does do some things right. It's shocking, but really true. But I'm really excited to have here today Camille Austin from Loba and Kitty Amann from, I always pronounce I always say Armin, but it's Amann. I just realized.
It's
an R in your name for some reason, like forever. Like it's always been ARMANN. I'm like, wow, I've been doing it wrong. And from Uncle Nearest, I'm really excited. It was so much fun catching up both of you ladies. We have so many great stories to share today. So, first I start always the same question for everybody. So Camille, I'll start with you. So what is your current role and your responsibilities in that role? Which I know is always a loaded question because our jobs are so vast. But go try to do it. Go for it.
It is, but I'll go for it. I'll give you the resumed version. My current role is the Director of Advocacy for a Mexican spirits company called Casa Lumbre, which means the House of Fire. We actually created the brands Mezcal Montelobos and Ancho Reyes. So those are the original brands that I worked with in different capacities, but sort of my baby per se was Montelobos for many years. I started as the U.S. ambassador for that brand and then moved on to be the global ambassador. And now I'm working on our whole portfolio. We've since launched a few new brands that I have behind me, Mexican ancestral corn whiskey, corn liqueur, some more mezcal, more things coming. But I work on the whole portfolio now.
Very exciting stuff. And Kitty, Amann. Yeah. Now I'm saying your name, Armin for years. For a million years. So I'm just apologizing now. What is your role?
So my title is Uncle Nearest Brand Steward, and my territory is Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So I guess in that role, just to give you some more detail, it's a blend of sales and marketing. That's usually how I describe it to folks, which I know we'll get into a little bit later with the questions. But yeah, those are my territories. I spread the story of Uncle Nearest and sell a bunch of whiskey every day.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All right. So, but you both, now we get the chance to expand with my second question, because you both have some interesting stories and journeys of like within the industry. And, so I'd love to hear a little bit of your backstories and what eventually led you to your current role. So just share a bit of your journey with us and, why you made the final plunge into this current position that you have now. Camille, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, it's a really interesting story. I have a very similar story of most brand ambassadors. I started as a bartender, then worked my way up and sort of learned how to manage bar programs. And through
sort of the programs you worked through. You worked at some pretty stellar places.
Yes, my focus was always on, or my background rather, was always in restaurant bar programs. So I actually, thinking back, I spent most of my time in restaurant bars versus cocktail bars, but I worked for Hakkasan Group for many years. I opened the one in Miami, moved to New York to open that one, and I also worked for Soho House Group. And through hospitality, I think I was a good, solid bartender. I'm very organized and methodical, and I was passionate about the drinks. But what I think I was really great at is that hospitality element. I was a host. A really great host. Mm-hmm. So I met the founders of the company that I currently work for, Danny and Moy. A little over 10 years ago, they were my regulars at Hakkasan. So they were actually coming to visit me with the first brand that they launched, which was Milagro Tequila. And they just continued to come and visit me. And I ended up over time growing a friendship with them. When I moved to New York, they would come and, have dinner and support me and hang for drinks. And that's sort of how I got into ambassadorship with Montelobos, was when they were ready to launch their next brand, which was Mezcal Montelobos. that they partnered with Ivan Saldaña on, they approached me to be their ambassador. And then the sort of, professional relationships started growing. And here I am almost 8.5 years later.
Wow. Yeah,
That's
and you did
awesome.
have an interesting journey. I mean, through that. I mean, working for William. Well, I guess we'll go into it a little bit because you went to William Grant's and things of that nature. So we'll definitely love to hear more about that. And Kitty, your background, because you didn't come from the bar industry originally.
I did. I was not known as a
you did.
bartender though. I did
Yeah,
and I didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So it's really interesting. I was working in hospitality my whole entire life, like since I could get a job, right? 16 years old, I was like, I'm going to be a waitress. I was a busser at first and I was terrible.
My daughter's a busser right now. She just got her first job as a busser at a diner in the Hamptons. So
oh my God, I love
she already has some good stories.
Oh my God, in the Hamptons, I can only guess. That's hysterical.
Yeah.
But I did that. So I worked in publishing. I had other careers, right? So I worked in publishing. I also worked in PR. But I always had to waitress and bartend to make ends meet. So it ended up mostly being on the floor because the places where I worked, I made more money there, right? Like it was something, and that's kind of how I stuck. But I also, through that, I met Misty Kalkofen, who is my really good friend, who some of you might know, as well as a few other bar ladies in Boston that you folks might know. And she was starting a group called Lupec, which stands for Ladies United for the Preservation of Endangered Cocktails. This was back in 2007. To that point, you remember? Yes, you were founding member in New York.
I remember. Your first New York's chapter. We were Lupec.
Yeah, it was amazing. We had so much fun. But for me, it was like one of those things where I had been working in restaurants forever, but we had like wine trainings and stuff like that, but I wasn't super educated about booze or about cocktails. So it was just such a wonderful place to be learning about all of that stuff. And it kind of coincided with me wanting to change my career a little bit and do more writing. I had done publishing. So I started a blog. Remember blogs?
What do people do now instead of blogging?
So
by
much
the way,
work.
Is it newsletters? Yes.
I
Is
think
it just
it's a blend
Instagram?
of
Nobody writes anymore.
Podcasting. People are still writing. I don't know.
Podcasts.
It's kind of crazy,
Newsletters.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's so much work.
It's so much work. So yeah, it was so much work. But I really wanted to kind of get more writing credits, and I was fascinated by cocktail history, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of always understood with my friend group. And then I started over time, similar to your story, Camille, I just started like going to these events, like Pernod Ricard with their like a gin event. And I would go to that. And then I'd be like over here at like this Bacardi thing or whatever. And I just kept like, just to learn, like it wasn't even like, and also just a great way to try new products and things like that. And through that, I got my first job on the brand side. I met a woman named Jessica Sparks who was like, look, we're hiring here for a Plymouth Gin brand ambassador. And I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. You're going to pay me to go tell people to drink the gin that I already tell them to drink.
Exactly. And it's always like, what? This seems like a dream job.
Oh, for sure. And also, like, if I'd known when I was 21 that, like, or any age, like, whatever, that there were jobs like this or on that side of the business, who knows? I could be, like, running a whole company.
It's never too late. It is never too late.
I know. Look at you. Like,
follow your dreams.
That. Yeah. So I did that. And then I worked for a few different brands. I worked for Fernet Branca. I was a consultant for a little while, worked with you, of course, with some projects. And then the Uncle Nearest position opened up in 2019. And through a former boss of mine, as well as some friends at the distributor, I ended up meeting Fawn and just being like, I have to work for this company. And it was timing. It's always timing. It was definitely timing and connections.
It is really always timing. And I definitely want to dive into about working for Uncle Nearest. But Camille, I also want to talk a little bit because for you, it's like such a great example. Like you met two regulars and you must have impressed them that much that and you stayed in contact with them for over years. Like they would find you in different places that they were like, this person needs to work with you. And that shows a big thing because we're going to talk about this later about building a personal brand, but how you represent yourself in all stages of your career really can have repercussions down the line, positive or not positive. Like if people know you as being so much of a party person and you're always like, just getting into trouble or whatever, it's really hard for them to take you seriously later on. Like when you do get your shit together, it's like on the opposite. And then to the other effect, you are good at what you do and you take your job seriously, I'm not saying we can't party and have a great time, because I think all of us ladies can do that. But you left a good enough impression that they were like, yep, this is our person. Like, we're going to take her wherever we go. And obviously they must have gave you a good impression as well.
Yeah, I think it's very parallel to what Kitty was just saying, that, you know, it goes back to the fact that we're in a relationship-based business, and that can evolve in so many different ways. But it just really stemmed from, you know, a friendship. And I'm Mexican American, so I found sort of a really great connection in the friendship with them. And, you know, they were back then Mexican entrepreneurs that were starting. They did not come from the spirits business. They had, you know, made a lot of mistakes and learned along the way, and then got to a point where they were becoming really successful with their first brand. But something that I sort of noticed even back then when they were my regulars, which was their entrepreneurial spirit, and they were always visionaries even back then. And it's something that I've always also had, is that sort of drive to learn more and to better myself. So I am definitely thankful that when I was a buyer, most of the time I was really sort of good on my word, and I would bring in the brands that I said I would, and I would, you know, menu place whatever I said I would, and or whatever I could. And that definitely comes back around, especially when you're,
absolutely,
you know, like what Kitty's doing. I work a little bit more distant with sales, but it's all intertwined in some way. So when you're on this side of the brand and you're doing sales and marketing or advocacy, you know, it definitely comes back around.
It does, right? Because it's like building great, like keeping, you know, I think one of the best practices that, you know, I've heard time and time again, and I've definitely shared, is, you know, you don't make promises you can't keep. And stay true to your word. Like, if you say something, follow through, even if it's sometimes like, you know what, man, I fucked up. I should never have told you I could do that. You know, I spoke above, but like, you know, don't just ghost somebody and just disappear, because people remember that. Like, accounts remember that, bosses remember that, your friends remember that, dating people remember that. It's just not a good practice in life. It's like, you know, just have the conversation, be honest, and sometimes you have to be humble and say, I just fucked up. And it's always a better policy than in so many other ways. So, and building on your relationship, as you said, keeping true to what you were doing. I mean, nobody's perfect, but if that's your majority of the time, like, people know that about you, and that's something that, like, that person's reliable. I'm sure Kitty, you know, I know you have that reputation, like, you know, it's like, Kitty's reliable. She, you know, she's going to show up, she's going to do the job. And that's half the battle. Showing the fuck up. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to curse today. Showing the fuck up, but it's true, right? And don't be a dick. Those are like my 2 number 1 rules in life. Like, just those 2 things, you're going to get far.
It's amazing. It's good advice.
Yeah. I think so. All right. So, Kitty, I do want to dive now into working for Uncle Nearest, because, you know, I think what Uncle Nearest is doing is quite revolutionary, right? So they have an entire female executive team. The team you're working with is extremely diverse. You said it was one of the most diverse group of people you ever worked with. Your team, the entire company is led by a very formidable Fawn Weaver, which I'm like, idolize her. So tell us a little more, like, what is it like working with Fawn, and why do you believe, like, what is her philosophy? What do you think her philosophy is about the people that she hires and puts, you know, and how she's put it together?
Yeah, I mean, Fawn is incredible. I'll just say that from the jump. And I don't want to sound like an acolyte in a creepy way.
I already did. I was like,
yes.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan girl. I'm going to admit it, throw it out there.
Great. Yes, and I'll just put it out there right now. If anybody's curious about Uncle Nearest, you know, anytime you have a chance to hear Fawn speak, she's incredible. She's one of these just really visionary folks. Yeah, it's good. And she also tells you things like the story of our brand and our company. Like, there's a lot of story, right? So I always take the opportunity to, even though I speak with her often, to, you know, because I sometimes I'll learn something that I didn't know before. I'll be like taking notes. But it's incredible. So she's not from whiskey, right? She's a woman who discovered the story of Uncle Nearest through the New York Times article that most of us also probably saw in 2016 about how Brown Forman and Jack Daniel were starting to incorporate the story of Nearest into their telling of the story of Jack, which is, you know, we wouldn't be here without that excavation and that discussion, which is so cool. So she was drawn to it by the storytelling aspect, and the woman doesn't hear, she probably hears no, but You know, if you think about the amount of no's one might have heard, right, coming from, not from booze, right, coming into this business, wanting to champion a story and get out there, and everything from just like getting people to make a call back about bottle sizes and things like that. Like, I think there really were a lot of facets about people being in the industry, not necessarily wanting to talk to someone who might not know what they're doing and new, etc. And the women, and they just pushed through. The whole team just pushed through. They figured it out. And that's what we keep doing. And I think Fawn's big thing is, so I would say about Fawn, working with her, get ready for the ride of your life, right? Get ready to be seen for who you are, like a whole person, which is really, really interesting, because I think that in a lot of companies, corporate environments, you have to be the work that you're doing in a bit, you know, like, so when I was first hired, I was both Kitty and I was also a yoga teacher, and I was also an author, and I was everything like that. I didn't have to kind of segment, which means a lot. Like, if you're a person who does a lot of things, like I can, you know, I'll segment if I have to, like I like a paycheck, but I would prefer to be honest, you know, and living my life. But I think all of us are also really driven by walking in our purpose, right? So every single day we're cementing the story of Nearest Green and his legacy, and pulling as we climb, which I can talk about now, or I can talk about in a little bit, like about how we're trying to really transform the industry to the extent that we can. And, you know, really Fawn, when she speaks about her team, she talks about making your own table, right? So that thing of like, no one's ever looked like us before, so we can look like anybody that we want. And we weren't trying to get in to the party that was already existing. And you've done that before, Elaine, right? We were talking about that the other day, about like creating your own
I always tell the story. Yeah, I was gonna say, I always talk about, you know, nobody's ever asked me to be on the panel before, like ever. Like, still to this day, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and nobody ever like sends me an email and goes, "Hey, Elaine, do you want to be on our panel to talk about things?" Nope, never. I always, every seminar I've ever given is because I've given it. Like, I decided one day, I was like, fuck, if I want to get a seminar at Tails or a seminar at BCB or anywhere, I'm going to have to write it and moderate it and bring the people I want to bring on board. So you got to set your own table. And I tell you, Ian Burrell did the same thing. Ian Burrell, the rum ambassador, he's like, nobody invited me to Rum Fest, so I created my own. And then he anointed himself the global rum ambassador. And he's doing it today. He's like, I didn't have a table to sit on, so I made my own. And I love that. And I love that about Fawn.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love that. I don't know, do you have a similar story, Camille, or?
Yeah, I definitely identify a lot with what you said about walking in your purpose, because, you know, when I finally sort of began to feel comfortable in my skin as an ambassador for Montelobos, I have always really been into the arts, and I always wanted to study performing arts. So like my first passion was musical theater and music and all of these things. So I decided to do something different and creative where I could get out those creative ideas that I had inside, and I created a character essentially. And that's how my alter ego, La Loba Mezcalera, the Mezcal She-Wolf, you know, which was an extension of this brand, which was the personality of this brand. It gave it a voice, and it gave it sort of an identity, which was also part of my identity. But it was so much fun and so creative for me all the time, in every point of the storytelling with that brand. So I think that that's spot on, Kitty. Walk in your purpose, do it authentic, that whatever that means to you, you know? I think that's really cool.
It is really helpful, and to have a company that allows you to do that, because I will say, you know, I always share with people, like, my biggest struggles of working with Diageo was, it was very hard to be me, because, you know, I'm a little rough around the edges. You know, I play both roles. I can dress and be all pretty and delicate and you know, and elegant if I choose, but most of the time, the true me is like, what the fuck? And that's the personality I am. And you know, so finding the balance between the two, and, you know, Diageo very much was like, yeah, so we want you to be you, just a little less you. And I was like, so, you know, I had to become, whenever I did stuff that was on camera, except for Bar Rescue, I could be a little more like myself. But when I did things for like Pottery Barn or any of the things that, you know, millions of videos and things that I had to do, I took on what I like to say, my Martha Stewart persona, you know, like, hi, my name's Elaine Duff, and we're at the set of Pottery Barn in Hawaii right now, and we're going to be, and then, like, I would have this different voice, the way I spoke.
I love it.
Person, and it was like, yeah, and I would have to be that person all day. And at the end of the day, I was like, exhausted, because I'm just like, give me a shot of fucking Jack and a beer.
Yeah, get me out of here.
But I mean, I do like being this person. I like being elegant. I like being sophisticated, but I also want to be me. And me is a little bit, I'm a little more out there. And it was always a hard balance to kind of figure out how to mix those two together. So I love, and I guess we'll jump into it then, Camille, you talking about the she-wolf, because finding your brand identity, right? So bringing your personal brand is such a huge part. If you want to advance in this industry, I think or in any career, I think it's really essential that you do obviously the job that you are hired to do, and you promote that brand and build that brand, but you also got to build yourself. You got to build your personal brand, and that many times requires you to do things outside of your job, and you can tie your role into it. I would say I like to build on the job I'm working on, but you got to decide what that is. For me, I started doing seminars. Diageo never asked me to do a seminar ever. Never asked me to go to it was just I'm going to Tails because we're
mind blown.
Like, I'm going to do these seminars, and they're like, okay, sure, do those seminars. Like, but it was something, it was extra work, but I knew it was what I needed to do to get my name out there into the world, besides just people knowing me from doing Bar Rescue, right? Because I didn't want that to be my legacy of just being on that crappy show. So, but for you, like, you created, and Kitty, I want to tell you, because you wrote a book, you brought your publishing back out, and you really utilized that. And Camille, you created this character. So, and your character, from what you explained to me, it worked in two ways. So expand a little bit more about the she-wolf and how you proposed it to William Grants, and like how you worked with marketing to really make it your own, and then where it went. And then Kitty, talk about the book.
It's interesting. There's actually a saying in Spanish that says it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And that's kind of
philosophy of mine. Love that philosophy.
And I'm not, putting that out there as official advice, but it's sort of how this identity sort of evolved for me throughout my ambassadorship. I think a couple foundational points to touch on first are, number one, that basic, making sure that you are working with the right brand. That for me, that was a tiny, tiny brand that, nobody knew about or even understood, because we were in the point of mezcal's life as a category. This was, 8 years ago. Mezcal was very different then. And, Misty was one of those first mezcal ambassadors, and even being a female mezcal ambassador at that time was almost non-existent. So to be a brand in a square-shaped bottle, it's we had a founder who got a PhD in agave, and he's talking about the science versus the romanticism and the culture. It was definitely something that evolved over time. And I think the second piece, aside from having that right brand that is for you, is the advantage of being with a tiny brand in a tiny category where you're really part of creating the story of both the category and the brand. So I didn't really ask for permission. We had pesos for a budget. We had tiny budgets. I didn't have, especially that first year and a half, I didn't have a lot of travel. So I had to sort of make do with what was coming out of my head, and, building the relationship with my brand manager at the time and sort of our tiny team, and working closely with the Mexico team to really understand and build the identity for the brand. And then it sort of started expanding. And I think the third piece, that layer, is consistency is key for ambassadorship. It's a slow grow. This is advocacy. It takes time. It's not immediate, like I go and I have a rock star meeting and I got a menu placement out of it. This is something that you have to be consistent with, follow up with, and really nurture. And we gave that great analogy that comes from my friend Jen Marshall that I love. She's like, she says, okay, mommy, I'm going to go and water some plants. Some plants need a little bit more water than others, and they'll be great and flourish. And then other plants need so much water, and they'll take a really long time to grow. So it's really about that. It was a slow grow and a build up, where we got to the point where it became this complete character, because first it was a nickname, then it was a character, and then when social media storytelling started becoming a thing, at that point I was also on the William Grant team, who, I mean, Charlotte and that ambassador team I learned so much from. They were our original US importer, and it was just really all about creativity and owning yourself. So I started becoming more in tune of mezcal culture and sayings, and I wanted to portray that mysticism and romanticism. That's what came authentically to me, to my core and to my heart. That's what made me fall in love with mezcal, so I wanted to share that. And I started learning more about wolves, and I started finding all of these parallels, and I said, wow, I'm kind of like a wolf. I'm sort of a loner, but I can move in a pack. And how does this come to life in a physical form? Well, let's get a wolf mask and let's howl, and when we pour mezcal we'll say ow. So it sort of was this thing that grew over time. And I haven't worked directly with I mean, I still help, the Montelobos transition and everything loosely, but I haven't worked directly on the brand for over 2 years, and people will not stop calling me La Loba. And I think that's okay,
Yeah, I think that's great.
That.
And I think that's a great example. And Eric's, I know if you're still listening, I hope you are, because he's,
Eric.
the William Grant team is also really good. So one thing I really enjoyed, I've had many people from William Grant's on the show, and and I've spoken to Charlotte about this. We did a seminar on brand ambassadors last year at Tails, and it was how did she hire people? And I just loved the story. Like, when they bring people on, they make you do a presentation, not about the brand, but about something you're passionate about, and they're more about making sure that you fit the personality of the brand than it is about like any other skill. It's like, are you the right fit? Are you the right quirkiness, or whatever quirkiness that brand might exude? They want to make sure that you're the right fit, and then they want you to own it. And I think that's really, really incredible. And it sounds for you, Kitty, that's exactly what they're also doing. At Uncle Nearest, they're allowing you to kind of be your whole person. So I was gonna say, you can either expand more on the Uncle Nearest and like how they do that, and also I'd love you to talk about your book, because I think that's also a big thing for you. It's like doing things outside your doing other things like writing a book or doing Instagram stories, whatever it is a great way of building your personal brand and putting yourself out there. So talk about Uncle Nearest, how you get to be yourself, and also talk about the book.
Yeah, I'll Drinking Like Ladies. Yes, so the book right behind me. So the book itself, I actually sort of laid out the structure when I talked about blogging, right? So that was my entree into freelance writing credits, what I thought would be a fantastic career as a freelance writer. Turns out that job is really hard. It's mostly pitching, and it doesn't pay that well, so hence waitressing and bartending. But it was through a friend, again, coming back to this idea of relationships and contacts. It was a friend of mine who came to me and Misty very early on, like 2007, when we were still blogging, and was like, I think this could be a great book. And we were just over the moon excited. I had worked in publishing. I had the very inglorious job of reading the slush pile, which is looking through all the proposals that come in and pitches and stuff like that. So I knew my way around all of that stuff. And so I wrote a proposal. Yeah, I mean, if anybody needs help, I'm your girl at any point. Truly.
You heard that first.
I know.
First. You're suddenly going to get all these proposals coming.
I know. Could you imagine? I'm like, so we worked on that, and then we started. The woman who at the time, who was a friend of mine, is Danielle Ciotti, and she was a editor. Pitched her team, and they rejected the book. She was like, we were like this close, like razor thin, and then there was someone on the publishing board that was like, I don't really drink, like I don't really get it, and like that was the end.
Wow.
And like that's how it goes. And so yeah, it's heartbreaking, but it's also part of it. I think any sort of creative pursuit, you have a lot of that rejection built in and baked in. But we went on and pitched, and Danielle eventually became an agent, and so she's our agent now. And she pitched the book for 10 years. Like she was pitching it and pitching it and pitching it. Not constantly, not every single day, I don't think, because she had other projects and things like that, right? But it was a lot of rejection. We heard a lot of like, I don't get women in cocktails. That was said to us.
Really?
I don't get
Pretty
women's
interesting.
right. I don't get women's history in cocktails, which I can kind of see because, I mean, it's the people who like it, but I can see how if you're just looking for straight up cocktail books, I get that. But it was kind of shocking, some of the rejections. And I always say, like, if you hear no, hi, oh hi Kai. If you hear no enough times and that your idea isn't great enough times, or it just isn't like gonna make the cut, like you can start to really internalize that and believe it. And I always carried a torch for the book. I think Misty thought it was never gonna happen, maybe, candidly. But in 2017, that February, I was like lounging on the couch on a Saturday, wicked bored. It was like snowing or something. And I looked at this old email address that was connected to the Lupec blog that I hadn't checked in like years and done anything on in years. And it was an editor who became our editor who was like, I found your blog. I think there might be a book there. And my joke about the book is that, I mean, I love it. I'm so excited and so thrilled by the success, but why now? You know?
Right.
I was like, why now?
Like,
and the answer there is, like, why now? Like, I'll take it, but why now? And very plainly, what we were told.
Because the industry changed, the world changed. I mean, like, you know, women drinking and women in the industry became more, it's now just normal.
Normal,
Than the exception, which is great.
Absolutely. And our editor, I mean, our agent was very plain. It was post the Trump election. I don't want to get into politics, but I will say what I was told was that women's publishers were interested in women's voices. And that was interesting too, because
but it's also great because you kept it out there. If it didn't stay out there, then that wouldn't hit time. And sometimes maybe that's also a story too. It's also about the fact that, like, at first you don't succeed, try again, because sometimes you don't. Like, I think about the first time I pitched my boss. When I said to my boss, and most people don't realize, I come from the event side of the business. I was the event manager for US Concepts, managing all of Diageo's events. And then I was the luxury, like, I did all the luxury events, so all the sponsorship deals for like Ciroc and Don Julio around the country. And then I became the account manager for Ciroc, Don Julio, and created their very first brand ambassador program, which was shit. That's so
crazy.
But this is 18 years ago, right? It was 2005, right? 2006. And I decided one day, I was like, I realized I really wanted to make a change. I really enjoyed education more. I really loved that part of the job, and cocktails becoming a thing. And I met Steve Olson, and I was like, I want to do what that guy does, because I also saw how much money we paid him. I was like, fuck, we pay that man a lot, and I was like, I want to do that guy's job. And I pitched my boss, and he said no, and I was like, we sat down for that meeting. And I'm sure you've all been in this meeting where it's like, okay, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, what do you want to do next? And I said, I pitched the job. I was like, I want to be Diageo's head mixologist and educator. And they were like, what? What the hell is that? No, that's not going to happen. And it took a year and a half where two bosses, moved through that position. And when I finally pitched it to Michael Stoner, who was running the brand ambassador program for the Masters of Whiskey, he was like, hell yeah, let's do it. He's like, Elaine, what do you need? Like, I can totally see you doing that job. And Bar 5 had just started. So he's like, set me to Bar 5 and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you just have to keep pushing it and doing the work. The work.
Timing is huge, because if our book had been published in 2014 or whatever time, like, it wouldn't. Who knows if it would have done anything? Like, people might not have bought it. Like, publishers aren't usually, they know things. Like, they're not like. Hi, Peter Zimmerman. Oh, it was the coolest, honey. Stay tuned. There might be an Uncle Nearest mini.
You never know. That would be fun. But what has the book done for your career? Like, doing that, like, once it was out there, obviously, once it launched, you get known much more, right? Suddenly you're in magazines, like, people start to get to know. So what did it do for your career?
Yeah, it's been great. It definitely solidified, like, any connection that Misty and I would have had to women in cocktails and women in spirits, which, as women in spirits, you all are in the same boat, right? I'm sure we get tapped to speak all the time and to think about that stuff. So I would say generally, if someone's looking to establish themselves as an authority in something, writing a book is a good idea, right? And you might have to start with a blog.
Or a newsletter.
Or a
Why not?
newsletter, yes, or
Yeah.
Instagram posts. I don't know. But I would say, like that's been really incredible. Like the work, like the actual creative process was like a great joy of my life. Like it was basically sitting and thinking about these unsung women in history. And then I'm not sure if it's clear from the titling, but we worked with working female bartenders from all over the world. And this is another thing where timing is really cool because it was through social media and networks and networking. And my network wasn't that big in 2007. But in 2017, like we were able to reach women in Estonia and Latvia and Ghana. And actually, we have a lot of women from Australia, which is so cool.
Oh, yeah. They take
so
bartending seriously.
cool.
I mean, everybody does,
Oh
but they are competitive.
Yes, let's get a trip. I want to go there. I just
Oh, yeah.
taken with them all.
When they actually open their borders again, I believe they're still.
Hey, can we go? They're like, no,
absolutely.
no Americans.
Yeah. Yeah, they really don't want anybody. They're like nobody. Their own countrymen are stuck out of their country at the moment. But we won't dive into that. No, that's amazing. And both of these, like you created the personality, Camille, like the role, and that I'm sure like escalated your people got to know you in that. You said that somebody at a trade show came over to you. It was somebody from Hennessy that made a comment to you about the howl. What did they say?
Well, it was basically a global brand director from Hennessy at the time. This was several years ago. He came over and said, I just wanted to tell you that I am floored with the fact that you have a sound that you make and when, everybody will turn around and know that it's your brand, which was the wolf howl. We started howling, pouring out mezcal, and people knew that it was the Montelobos crew.
That's awesome.
It's sort of, Ivan Saldana told me once, we're in the business of telling stories and making great drinks is just a part of it. So I think the lesson from that is to pull really how you're going to tell the story, and we all have different ways of telling them. And that was my sort of authentic, purposeful way of telling my story.
No, I think that actually I would love you to expand on that because it is, when you get into the role, you especially new brand ambassador, you look around and you're like, fuck, there's so many amazing people, right? It's like, there's so many amazing people doing this job, and especially, and maybe you're becoming a mixologist and you're like, I can never compete with those guys or I can't do that, and it can be intimidating. It can make you feel like have doubts about yourself and what you can bring to the category. And I think we talked about yesterday, it's like, you can't be somebody else. You have to bring your own personality. It took me years to figure that one out. Like I have to bring it. I just got to be my own person. And it's like, I'm never going to be able to compete with some of the big mixologists out there because I don't work behind a bar. I work behind Diageo's bar. And so, and I can only learn so many techniques and I just make yummy, delicious drinks. They're not complicated. They're not, nothing in my move, but they sell. That's what they do. And I got to be comfortable with that and not feel like I was a fraud. Like, oh my God, why aren't I doing these advanced things? And I'm like, because it's not who I am and I don't have the time to learn that. Because I'm not in that atmosphere enough. And I had to learn to be happy with that and just make that my personality. This is what I do. Like I do spirits education, I do bar education, but this is my thing. And for you, Camille, you sound like you found your personality because you were working with a maestro who is a scientist in the world of agave, which is like, how do you compete with that? And so you did.
That was very intimidating at the beginning, to be honest. And it was, the people that I knew were our other co-founders, the founders of the company, Danny and Moy. And then Yvonne came on later with the Mezcal project. So I didn't know Yvonne. I didn't have he wasn't my regular before. So I had to build up a relationship with him and sort of understand how I could complement with my skills and understand that point too. I think that's also something really key with ambassadorship that many times companies will turn in a script and say, this is the brand identity. This is what the brand script is, spiel, this is the 5 minute, 2 minute, 10 minute, whatever, or the story. And I like to challenge that with our team because it's really important because I lived it for every single one of our ambassadors to feel like they're part of writing the story. I was also very fortunate because I had a team around me with Yvonne and with Charlotte and, with everybody that we had, they were open to that. They wanted to hear because they didn't, if I wasn't close to Mezcal, they were going to be even, further. So I think when I understood that my niche and my expertise and talent was in the experiential side of it to complement Yvonne, and that I didn't have to be Yvonne Saldana talking about, the original genus of agave and these sort of things. Of course, I learned it because I listened to his voice for, almost 6 years in countless seminars, and I learned so much from him, and I still learn so much. But I think it's about that. It's about really, learning what you can bring to the table and how you're going to really blow that up.
No, absolutely. I don't know if you have, Kitty, do you want to expand on that at all? I mean, you've had to represent different types of brands. I mean, Fernet, I mean, and now Uncle Nearest, you're the expert, and you can't be an expert in everything, right? So it's like finding you do have to do the word, but find out where you're comfortable and like what you want to talk about. But Kitty, I don't know, how have you handled working for, different Amaros and whiskeys?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so different. I would say what the first thing that came to mind when you spoke about being like who you are and accepting what you don't know was when I started working with Uncle Nearest in Boston, because I started to really realize how segregated our city was, for example. Right. So then I had to think about and I brought a lot of guilt and shame to that. I don't know who are the Black owners. I don't know who the brand isn't pigeonholed to be for any particular person. Right. But I was like, this is a story. I don't know if people in Boston know it. Where can I go? What do I do? And I didn't know what I didn't know. I got to a moment where I was just like, I don't know what I don't know. I go to cocktail bars. Let's talk about I had thought about the demographic and the sort of what was going on in the bar room, I think, in a more cerebral way, but never in a very practical way in terms of bars. A lot of the mixology bars are very, very white, right? There's we all know this, the breakdown, etc. So I had a lot of I had to have a lot of humility around this. And then I started doing my research and looking around, and it wasn't until the Boston Black Hospitality Coalition was formed that I realized that there was a very good reason that I didn't know who owned what, because there are only 8 liquor licenses in Boston that are African American and Black owned.
Wow.
8.
Wow.
8 out of 1,200, 8.
8. Wow.
So, I have a lot of grace. I have a lot of customers that love the brand and that have become my friends. And then I've also just done a ton of my own research about the city, about systemic racism, about the history of who was permitted to own and buy and things of that nature. Because you think of, there's the way that we perceive different regions of the country and who has access to what. But it was a pretty big, that's been pretty interesting to me.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was but I had to have that moment, Elaine, where I was just like, you can't know what you don't know. You might mess up, you might offend someone. They might be but the more I asked my white friends, the less information I got. No one knew where to go. No one knew. The distributor wasn't this isn't me. You know what I mean? I had to, and there's a very good reason for that, which is much, much, much bigger than this spot.
No, but I think that's incredible. And the fact that every brand ambassador for Uncle is doing that research about their own city, that could be, oh my God, that could be an incredible thing. The amount of knowledge that can be consolidated, but also how to have those conversations, because they are important conversations to have. So good for you because you have to be brave to be able to go into a place that you've never entered before and to explore a new world and to admit things you don't know. And it's I might not do this correctly, but so work with me here. So I think that's really commendable.
A lot of grace. Okay.
We love Kitty. Who doesn't love Kitty?
Yeah.
All right. So Kitty, let's talk about that also, because we talked about actually, Camille, we'll go back, and then Kitty, we're going to talk about sales. Because Camille, your current role, you have to work alongside your marketing team a lot, and you. From what you described yesterday, is that you have a really a collaborative approach, which I think is really exciting. Can you share with us who's part of this team that you work with, and how the process works, and why do you think it's such a great way of working?
Definitely. In our US team right now, we have about 6 brand managers, a combination of our existing projects and upcoming projects, and then we have in Mexico about 4 brand managers. A CMO, a chief marketing officer as well, who sort of looks after the global brand launches, which it's really interesting because on a global scale, it's the US market, and then Mexico and rest of the world is very tiny still. It sort of goes to show you, the differences in our drinking culture, but and taxes and so many complex things. But what I really love about sort of where we've gotten to, and I think the direction that we're going into, is exactly that. I like positioning with our team this analogy of, what we're trying to do is not just build a flimsy building that is going to, wash away with a big natural disaster or whatever it may be. We're trying to build a monument that's going to withstand the test of time. And if you have the foundation, I like to say that foundation is marketing, right? It's our vision, our plan for this brand, the DNA, the health, and the growth and the path that it's going to take. Then you have the bricks that you have to put up. And the bricks, that would be commercial, right? Without our commercial team going out and getting those placements and building that brand health, we can't, sort of continue to go toward that monument of this vision of this monument. And then you have the mortar, that glue that keeps everything together, that's seeped into everything, that's advocacy. And that is what is going to build your monument that is going to last for hundreds of years, right? So I don't look at advocacy just as trade advocacy. It's in everything. You have internal advocacy. You have to advocate and engage your marketing team, your agencies, your PR, your social, your commercial team, your distributors. It's everything. Advocacy is literally in everything. And there's also commercial advocacy and marketing advocacy that I don't do directly, but that the marketing team does. So what we do at the end of the year, we all put our heads together and we start each individually working on our piece of the draft. And then we do the first brainstorm and we say, okay, given our learning.
The draft on what? The draft on what?
The brand plans. This is done for each brand. And we come together using each our sort of perspective and area of expertise. Mine is out in the field and advocacy. And then we present our first draft of giving our learnings from last year. And I don't mean just learnings on the brand. I mean learning we just had a year and a half where we learned so many things. And we were talking about this also, Elaine, that marketing is never going to be the same again. And you touched briefly also, Kitty, on this, is that if we do approach it the same way that we did several years ago, we would be doing ourselves a disservice because we're living in a different world, right? So it really is about tapping into our resources, both internal and then finding those external that we don't have internally, to continue educating ourselves, to be really thoughtful in a 360 vision. And that's sort of how the process that we take to building out our plan. Then the brand manager comes in, puts that second draft in, puts all those pieces together. What are the commercial goals and how are we going to achieve them? What are the advocacy goals and how are we going to achieve them? And then together we start shaving things off and giving it form. And it's just worked wonders to work as a team to build that. We're all part of.
That makes a lot of sense because the advocacy, I think some people overlook it sometimes, the fact that it's being built into the actual marketing plans and how they can execute. I mean, I think it's always part of it, but it's the fact that you are an integral part of the brand planning is so important and so collaborative. And also the amount of ideas that probably are developed because you guys are all sharing and you're not finalizing the concept. You're just coming in with these are my ideas and it's kind of loose. So I'm going to present them. And then you probably take, when you find some good ones, and you build upon them, I'm assuming, right?
Totally.
Absolutely. Which is such a great way of working. I mean, Kitty, it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration that's happening. I know Uncle Nearest is still new, all the team is still working together. So I don't know if we've gotten to that stage yet. Does all the brand ambassadors have monthly meetings or any of that thing to share best ideas or anything yet?
So I will say something interesting happened right when the pandemic started, where we all were tasked with coming up with our own marketing plan for the brand.
Okay.
It was wild. And
yeah,
I took myself to marketing university and I think I was maybe supposed to write a market plan. I don't really know. My boyfriend was teasing me. He was like, "Your thing was 13 pages. Nobody read it."
Nope. He's totally right.
No, but it was we all had a chance to like view everybody's work, and it was a wild thing. It was like one of those crazy things that you did right when the pandemic happened, where you're just like, I don't really know the next step and how are we going to do that. But we were able to pull from, we kind of all voted on what we thought were the coolest ideas or the best ideas, and worked those into our plan for the rest of the balance of the pandemic, at least, and going forward as well too. So that was really cool. I think in general, we try to share as much as we can. We were just at a big sales meeting in Tennessee. So we did a lot of like mind share there, but we also like love each other in a really intense way. It's like very interesting. So I think
That's
if
awesome.
we could all have like, I know it's a little wild. I think if we could have like a quarterly summit or something, we probably would, just because it's just so great to be in touch with people and share ideas. But collaborative.
It is. A brand ambassador life can be really lonely, right? It can be a very lonely life, and you can feel kind of isolated. So to be able to share your ideas with other people and get feedback, I think is really essential. And listen, actually, Kitty, one of your biggest responsibilities is sales. And can you tell me some? Did you bring the article, the brand ad? Because she said the ad for the position was really. Did you forget? It was really wild. Like it just said like sales in big bold letters, and then there was like the 10 philosophies.
10 principles. Yeah, I didn't bring the job description because I couldn't find it. I was take it down because we must have filled the position. But I will say it was basically like a brand ambassador or brand advocate, brand steward, whatever position description that would look familiar to you guys. Certainly. So, the KPIs are similar across the board, like menu placements, trainings, ride withs, things like that. And then it was also these 10 guiding principles. The first of which is we do it with excellence or we don't do it at all. I mean, I can read them all, or I can just not. We can share them.
Pick a few.
I'll pick a few. Okay. Every day we pound the rock, which is, I had to like look that up.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must be like pound the pavement.
I know. It's like, is it biblical? Like, I don't know. But it's to your point, a similar analogy as the watering, right? So every day we pound the rock. So like, and it's such a cool principle because the idea is that like, imagine like a master sculptor or whatever carving something out of stone, and like every they have a beautiful Michelangelo statue of David at the end, but on the way there's lots of tiny little rock pounding that is happening, right? So, and each is as important as the beautiful sculpture in the finish. So once you get to the beautiful sculpture at the end, yes, we celebrate, but you have to celebrate the little rock poundings, right? And it's a beautiful, it's nice because you can, all those moments that you have when you do a brand pitch or, like a meeting with a buyer and they're just like, and you walk out and maybe it took you an hour to get there and it's hot and you're sweaty and you don't know what to do and you just feel sad. You can like have a moment where you're like, okay, this still counts. Like I'm still, because this might be your best count in 2 years. Like that sort of faith going through is cool. So, we say all team members' opinions are welcome. The more we know, the more we have yet to learn is one of them. We speak life, we speak light. It's just like, what is this? Like,
what does that mean? Yeah, exactly.
That's just more,
sounds very philosophical. Like,
yeah.
Out there in the world. But for you, I mean, the sales part sales is definitely really important, obviously, for being a brand ambassador. It's not part of everybody's role. Like, I know for William Grant, it's not their main focus. Like, being the brand advocate and putting brand personality is more of their role. Okay. And obviously, you're always kind of selling in some way. But for you, like, selling is something that you have to do, and you've now had to do it a little bit more for the off-premise. And this has been a big fear. A lot of people in the industry, they're like, off-premise, like I've never approached the off-premise. I guess the question I asked is like, what do you find is the biggest challenge when selling to the off-premise?
I think for me personally, I can only speak to myself, is just it's truly the intimidation factor. And I'm going to speak plainly. Like it is like most of the off-premise in Massachusetts, at least, is owned by an older white man, right? We've all had this approach. And Massachusetts, New York is probably very similar. We're not like, hey, honey, come on in. Some people are.
You're like, nope.
You might be interrupting somebody. Like, they might be pissed because the Red Sox lost, like all those kind of things. So I think that but I also have years and years of tough skin, working in restaurants and stuff like that. So I think sometimes the sort of like getting past this idea of making an intro to someone who could intimidate me for any variety of reasons. Once I can get through that, like it's just building a relationship, right? And like these people are the same as buyers, and like if you can figure, it's the same as like presenting to a bar manager. Like you figure out what time is there, people are there, what is a good time for them to show up, things like that. Don't interrupt folks when they're trying to do their inventory and stuff like that. Just the basics. And if you can build that relationship, the other thing too is maybe even more so than in bars, like folks that own liquor stores, like they might have owned it for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And like their dad might have opened it after Prohibition. Like, so it's kind of cool, like if you make that relationship, it can go on and on and on and stuff. So
it just takes a lot longer to talk to them, right? Sometimes because they're just like, they don't always crack. It's not like, hey, how are you? My name's Elaine, nice to meet you. And they're like, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you're like,
and they might just not want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I really rely on the distributor a lot. I've learned to rely on the distributor guidance in terms of, like you think of it like the distributor also, a lot of these folks have worked for anywhere from 10, 15, 20, 30 years with the same customers, right? So just kind of relying on the cues that they can give about like what's a good time and whom to see and like what to expect and stuff like that has helped me a lot, right? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. You should definitely pick your sales rep brains. Like, hey, what am I walking into? What kind of person is he? What is the information or she or they want to hear? Like, do they drink, not drink? Do they want the TV? Like, what do they want?
Yes. And it's nice to visit with them too, because usually, like, it's really, really nice.
When you pop into a liquor store and visit, is it just like, hey, and you walk around the store and you just like check in with them for 5 minutes? Like, it's much shorter. It's much faster, right? It's just like,
it's more fast.
Yeah,
you can do 10 accounts in a day. Don't tell my boss, because then he'll be, I don't know. No, my boss is amazing. But it's the same, like half the time it's just the same as it would be in a bar. You're just not sitting down and drinking, right? So you're asking about their kid, you're bullshitting about the Red Sox. I don't know.
Yeah. And just checking in how things selling, what's selling, what's not selling. Which I think, that's what I've heard. It's and I've done it myself. I had to do it for one of my clients when they were very kind, an RTD client of mine. I just signed, and I'm sure this is a story that many people had before the pandemic. I was going into like my best year ever. I just signed like 3 new clients, had them all on retainer. I was like, this is gonna be an awesome year. And like then the pandemic hit, and my one client is from a company called Two Chicks. And she was so kind. She's like, Elena, I really want to continue working with you. We had to change the working structure. She's like, all right, what can we do? So we're like, off-premise, right? Off-premise doing well. So she gave me the list of all the off-premise accounts, and I would spend like 2 or 3 days, like at least 3 hours a day, just calling accounts, being like, okay, so my name's like, are you open right now? Like, have you heard of the brand? Do you carry RTDs? And I was like, just getting ready. And most people were like, had nothing else to do, so they were just talking to me and like drop off samples. When is a good time? And I was like, this is such a good approach. I'm like, we should always do it. Like, I was able to find out when the buyer was. When they were a good time to drop off samples, like, what are the products they had? You have to call obviously before they get busy, just like a bar. Like, don't call after 3 because, that's when their stores start getting busier. Don't call on Thursdays and Fridays because people are leaving for work earlier. You start to find out the same hours. But I found that was a great approach. And then I could just send the information to my sales rep, or if they were open, I would go and drop off samples or whatever it was. But you just have to work it a little bit differently. Which is a lot of fun. Camille, did you have to do any off-premise at all? Like, do you ever have to work in that world?
Well, I had never done it before until we were forced to launch our brand in a pandemic, Katie was just saying about the timing, and I'm so thankful for sort of really getting to understand the off-premise a lot more, because our previous brands were really built on the on-premise. So I didn't work with the off-premise a lot previously. I didn't know it very well. This experience of really sort of coming to appreciate our different audiences was really, really valuable. Because we launched Ava Solo in May, so we had been shut down for about 2 months, and it sort of, changes the dynamic when you have to go in and sort of build a brand new brand that nobody's ever heard of in a category that is barely exists, that is, Mexican ancestral corn whiskey. But what I love is that the appointments are much earlier than the on-premise.
Yes.
That's pretty exciting. You get to start your day and go hit a bunch of accounts really early. And a lot of them, really don't see many brand people versus the on-premise. So they're really excited when a brand person comes in and wants to support, buy a few bottles or talk about the brand, buy a bottle to, to crack and have a tasting. They really, really appreciate it. And we started doing during the pandemic also these like virtual tastings with some of our retail partners, which were amazing. And I found, I totally agree with Kitty. I found that a lot of them are really excited to learn and super stoked to have, our ambassadors and our master distiller and that sort of thing. So it's definitely another side of the business that I got to know because of that experience. And I will never take it for granted, again.
No, I think that's all both really leads me to such great points. It really is. It is an eye-opening experience. They are, different personalities and types, and sometimes they don't come across as they want to have, they want to learn anything. But after you spend some time talking to them, you're like, you do care a little bit about whiskey. So let me just tell you a few, like a little bit, like enough, like. So I know you don't want to hear about my fermentation process or the aging process, but I'm going to give you just enough so that you can sell this brand if somebody asks about it, like that, and they're like excited. And sometimes if they do drink, sometimes a lot of them don't. People don't drink that own liquor stores. They're really happy to see you, and sometimes they're just bored and they're just so happy someone came in and said hi. So it's those times, like that's the big thing. No, that was really great. All right, so let's talk about also. Kitty, so you just had something really exciting happen for the brand. The Uncle Nearest Distillery and Visitor Center just opened. So what was it like to be there for your team? And like, what do people expect when you go down? Like, is it open? Is it ready to roll?
Yeah,
I know it's open.
Yeah,
like, can people go visit?
Yes, I'll tell you what to expect first. So we bought a distillery. So we actually own the original house and farmhouse where a young Jack Daniel would have been taught to distill by Uncle Nearest. It's our property, which is strange. It was for sale and Fawn Weaver bought it. That's a whole separate story. Very, very cool. But very immediately clear that it was not going to be scalable to do a distillery there. So Fawn bought a 270-acre Tennessee walking horse farm in Shelbyville, Tennessee, which is between, I would say it's about an hour from Nashville, so a little bit closer than Lynchburg. It's so beautiful. So it's huge. It's beautiful. You drive up, you pull up, you're going to find horses like lounging in the pasture. There were 2 cute little foals like napping on the grass because they kept the Tennessee. Yes, they're keeping the Tennessee walking horses. There is a beautiful welcome center, tasting room, like a merch area with so much cool merch. Like if you're an Uncle Nearest super fan, you have to go because I can't even begin to tell you like everything from like beach towels to shirts to like a branded like vintage truck. Very, very cool. There's also a non-alcoholic speakeasy called Philo and Frank's, which is named for Fawn's parents. I know, so interesting. So Fawn's parents were teetotalers, and we really want the whole distillery experience to be like a hang, like a place where you can go and not just be a whiskey aficionado, but someone who wants to relax and chill with your family. So that's really, really cool. And there's some really great story involved with that speakeasy. It's supposed to look like an old soda fountain, basically. And it tells the story of Tennessee Prohibition, some cool Tennessee history, as well as women's history, because a lot of the suffragettes, a lot of the early Prohibition activists were women. So it threads the needle in a very, very cool way. I learned a lot in that room. There's also, I don't know if you've been to Nashville and seen the Angel Wings, but what gives you, I'd heard about them, but I never seen them. So Kelsey Montague is that artist. Yeah. So you
see them like when you walk into the town, or you see like, I've taken pictures in between them. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So we have one of those on the property, which is amazing. So you can do an Uncle Nearest photo there. And then we also have a really cool family tasting room where everybody who's worked on the team everybody who's worked on the brand from the beginning and ongoing will have their picture. And that was a really cool thing because Fawn says that was born out of her going to distilleries and seeing sort of wall of fame type stuff and having it just be this people with the same, older white men.
Yeah.
So, and that when I learned about that my picture was going to be somewhere involved in this, I was just so moved because that's something that I can send my nieces to and my, as they get of age and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. So, there's also amazing barbecue. So Barrel House Barbecue, which is located in Lynchburg. They have an outpost at the distillery as well. So definitely go.
And can you drink in that county, or is it a dry county?
You can drink in Shelbyville. Yeah.
Okay.
You can drink.
Yeah, that's always thing that always it freaks you out. It's like you go to counties and like, I'm sorry, you can't drink here. Like there's still dry counties in Tennessee. Yeah.
So wild.
It is very wild. But I love Camille. Have you been down to Nashville? Have you been to any like that?
I've been there twice. Yes. It's a really, really cool bar town. Love eating there and drinking.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. Well, Kitty, I look forward. So, are you going to start doing like trips down there?
Yeah. So we'll have there's tours, and then there's also I think there's going to be like an industry focused tour. I'm not sure what the timeline is on getting that up and running, but if people want to keep in touch with me, I can try to make sure that they get on those, which will be a little bit more intimate and in depth. And then I'll be actually right before the pandemic happened, we were about to pop off in Boston. I was going to bring a tour down from Massachusetts, and then Victoria was coming to the market. It was the whole thing. So sadly, I was not able to go, but I think there will be like market trips for bartenders. If anybody's a bartender and they're wherever you are in the corners of the U.S. watching, then certainly keep in touch with us because that's an awesome
that's very, very cool. I'm excited to see that. And now I want to talk about Camille. Like one of the great conversations we had yesterday is you said you work for a woman senior executive, kind of like Katie works for an entire female executive team, and she provided you some valuable lessons. And I think this one particular one you said I think is something a lot of us probably need to hear, and it's about not getting caught up in the minutia. Like, can you expand on that? Like, why she told you that, and like how you now put that practice into use?
How I worked on changing my chip. So basically, I think for those of us who have a similar, trajectory where we started off as bartenders, I think being a bartender is all about the details. It's all about your planning and your mise en place, and then your execution and your close, and everything in between. And then you move up to management and you really have this incredible ingrained skill where you have this relatability because you've done the job before, but you have to oversee it. And when you move into ambassadorship, I really consider the role of an ambassador as, such an important connector of everything, connector of teams, connector of trade, of distributor, of consumer. And when we're going to execute an event, some things that we always talk about with our team is we should think about one, engaging and hiring trade to help us out and sort of help execute cocktails. I know that we all want to bartend, but if we're all bartending, we can't oversee sort of the bigger picture of the event. And the same goes to, right now when what I'm doing is I had to get comfortable sort of delegating. And I also want the team to feel like I felt with Montelobos, where they're helping to write that story and where they're sort of giving their own ideas and their own initiatives to the brand. And it's sort of becoming a little bit of theirs because I know I felt for many years that Montelobos was my brand, even though I knew that it came out of Ivan Saldaña's mind. I was like, no, but the Wolf Howl is mine, but the Wolf Pack is mine. And I think it's really important to be able to recognize when things have reached a cycle and you're able to make room and let things go to welcome something in new. And we can only do that by sort of changing our chip, bringing our mindset a little bit more top line and being able to see the bigger picture. And I think that the sort of other layer to that is, going back to what we were saying earlier about doing more thoughtful marketing and just working in the spirits industry in general, is how can we look at our proposals through a 360 lens where, we have thoughtful PR and thoughtful social media. And that really means, getting out of the details and seeing it sort of from a bird's eye view.
No, I think that it is really hard, because you just said, coming from the bartending world and coming from, just doing it, even like events, you do get kind of caught up in the little things, and you want to be part of it because you want to execute it all. And having that top line vision can sometimes be really hard, because and that's, one of the things I also learned, and I'm sure, I don't know if Kitty had the same spirit, when I started working more with brand teams or brand managers, because it can also be frustrating as when you're a brand ambassador and you might not be aware of this, like why is the brand manager seem to be focused on this other thing? Like, why are they talking about this? Like, we have to care about that. And it's like this tiny little detail that you're so focused on, like, we need to have more wolf hats or whatever it is, and it's really small, and they're thinking of the bigger picture, like, yeah, we know, but we also only have a budget for this much, and this is like the bigger, broader view that we have to look at, and here's their whole perspective. So a lot of the conversations we've had on here is like, learning to be like, before I get frustrated about something, I really need to sit in the room with my brand managers to understand the big picture. What's the 5-year plan? What's the 1-year plan? So that when I'm pitching events or ideas, I have that in my mind. So they have the big picture view. I might come on a smaller, but I need to think big. They'll help me think bigger. Like, hey, I have this great idea. How do I think of it on a bigger scale? And can you help me work through that? And making it scalable, which is something that learning how to do that. It's a word I had to learn as I got more advanced in my career. I was like, scalable, and creating a project plan and breaking it out into small, I was like, I understand that now. It is
keeping us legal too, bringing our ideas to life in a legal way, which is another big one.
That is another, but yeah, it's like, why can't we do such a cool idea? And then you pitch it and you're like, yeah, it's totally not legal. We've all been there. That's definitely one of the biggest frustrations.
We'll get arrested.
Actually, yeah, we're going to get arrested, and our brand's going to get fined. Actually, last week we were discussing, and oh my God, I'm having a complete brain fart. It was on my show last week.
With Cam and I watched it earlier. Cam and Ms. Zimmerman.
Jordan Zimmerman, thank you. I had a complete brain fart. Jordan Zimmerman, and Jordan did have a really interesting idea that I highly recommend. I actually put it up just a 9-minute segment of that on my Instagram feed, which was, how she helped streamline the process for, you can't do it for everything, but for events that are happening all the time, like very similar style events, how you can streamline the process to get it approved by legal. So she just created a form, like she worked with her Google Teams. Yeah, you have to listen to it. It's really smart. Like they worked with somebody in IT to create a form. So like if X equals, Y, then this is the result. So like they were able to plug in all the common questions that legal will always ask you.
Oh, so awesome.
You answer them up front, so that, when they push back, it might just be one thing instead of like 17 other questions. You've already answered all the questions, and everybody fills out the same form. And I'm like, it's so ingenious. And it was like she worked with her IT team to create the form so that these things, like these people are always CC'd. So if you plug in Uncle Nearest in event and it's like off premise, there might be somebody that always needs to know, and it automatically, that's the yes. So if X equals Y, then this will happen. These 3 people get CC'd always, that happens. So it automated things. It was very ingenious. A little off topic from what we were talking about, but I wanted to add that in there.
Love it.
No, I think it's a really great thing. All right, so we're going to talk about, because we're getting into the 3:15 hour, and I know you ladies are very busy. So 2 last questions. So one is, there is definitely that, and we talked about it a little bit before, everybody I think has it. It's one of the biggest phobias that most people have expressed, which is, I'm not good enough, or I don't have I'm not knowledgeable enough about the topic we are speaking about, especially when presenting to the trade. Like that's everybody's like panic. Like everybody talks about, like whenever I go to present to my peers, I get really nervous that somebody's going to know that I don't know all the answers. So, you know, and Camille, I know you touched about this before about presenting with the expert of the brand. And Kitty, so I'm going to start with you, Kitty, then Camille, I'd love you to like wrap that up into a bow. What are some things you do? Like, how do you overcome that? Because it's hard. I know I experience it.
I mean, I started reading my own bio before out to myself aloud, because there's just a lot of experience there. That was actually something I took from a Women of the Vine and Spirits
That's
PR
great.
course. Read your own damn bio, because guess what? It's got a lot
of good stuff.
And I tend to practice, prepare, and over prepare. Like, I like to work a lot on my notes and things like that. And then, but beyond that, it's just like spiritual, emotional work. Like, honestly, like therapy and meditation, and just like constantly working, because a lot of like self-image stuff is mine that I carry. Like, it has nothing to do with this work. It's different stuff. So I think devoting time to that kind of stuff. And then, you know, if someone's not going to play nice at some point, you just have to walk away and like understand they probably weren't going to play nice in the first place. Like, you don't have time for that.
That is very true. And we talked about it before, you can't always be the expert, right? So sometimes you just got to own your piece and like what you are an expert at. And sometimes I'm just humble. I'm just like, listen, this is what I know. This is from my own experiences. This is what I've done. This is the places I've been. This is the books I've read. This is the knowledge. And if I make a mistake somewhere along the line, if possible, and I mess up a date or something, you know, please later on, please let me know. I always love to learn. You know, don't call me out in the middle of my presentation. That'll throw me off. And that's not that's a dick move. But Camille, you were talking about, like, I think about it is a dick move, that you know, embraced a different part of it. You embrace like you found your own personality.
Yeah, actually, one of my closest friends, Jaime Salas, who's a tequila ambassador, years veteran. The first time he saw me present years ago to the distributor, he said, you know, that was great. The information was really good, but I didn't see you. I didn't see your personality, because I was nervous. It was my first time presenting in front of 100 New York distributors. And you know that they can be very much an intimidating group. So at that moment, I sort of understood this is exactly what I need to do. I need to tell this story, but bring what I bring to the table out to them. And I need to set the tone with that. So, you know, if my sort of creativity and personality needs to come out at the beginning as a first impression, come out. And the first thing, and this sort of became my signature when I got really comfortable in it, was I started off the training, walked into the room and started howling like, you know, and like, what is this? This is insane. What is she doing? And, you know, they started howling together, and then I would say some, recite a mezcal saying in Spanish and sort of break the ice. And then you get to that point right off the bat where they feel comfortable with you, they're getting loose, and then you just start. And the other thing is, I think we should take every experience like an opportunity for a lesson, right? There's tons of stuff that Ivan would have probably answered better than me. He has a PhD in agave. I don't, you know? But every single time I didn't know an answer, I would be honest and, you know, let them know that I would find out. And at each time I would present after that, I would know a little bit more, you know? So towards the end of my ambassadorship on that brand, I felt really comfortable owning a brand training on the category or on my brand story with my little flair. So I think it's about setting the tone with what we bring to the table as individuals.
No, I think that those are both great lessons. I do believe in the mental preparation as well, and reading your own bio, because sometimes it is like, you don't know where you're at until you know where you've been, right? That's the saying, right? So looking back sometimes, it's an exercise I did in a women's course that I took, which was like, write your, like, everything you've ever achieved in your entire life from the time you were like born. Like everything.
Just still writing it.
Yeah, you're still writing it, and to look back, because it is sometimes you're like, fuck, I have done a lot, because you forget a lot of the things that you've achieved and done, because you just get focused on that one moment, and you're like, I'm not enough, and then it's like, actually, I am a lot. And to your point, Camille, like bringing it all together and owning what it is, bringing your own personality. It was something that it took me a long time to own that and be okay. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be technical. I'm not that person, because that's not exciting to me. and bringing that. And then if you do make a mistake or don't know something, as you said, it's okay. Just be like, you're right, I don't know that, but remember it for next time so that you keep building. Because eventually you will own it. The more you do it, what's the 10,000 hour rule? The better you will get and comfortable you will be. All right, so we're going to wrap this up with this question I always ask everybody. So you've both been working in this industry for a long time. We've all either mistakes you've made that you've learned from that you want to share and say, hey, this is something I had to learn the hard way, don't do this. Or it could also be more of a thing of like, here's an insider tip that I'm aware of that many people know and I love sharing with other people. So you can pick. Kitty, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I had a few like specific incidents that came up to mind, but I ended up scaling back a little bit because I wanted to share the nugget, the essence of it. So one was blending my personality into my work in a role where I was ultimately replaceable. So you can all chew on that. But thinking about, I don't want to name the brand specifically, but I've done this a few times actually, where I've kind of just dove right in and I was Kitty, the brand is my last name. You can call me Kitty Uncle Nearest, I don't care. But like it became so much part of my identity. And then when I was no longer with that brand for whatever reason, I felt lost or depressed or just I felt like a part of me was no longer. And the fact is that like, you know, in a corporate structure, you know, sometimes you're more replaceable than you realize you are. I'll just leave it like that. So I just think boundaries are good. Like boundaries are good. And that's something I'm working on in all areas of my life. So, you know, we'll see. It's a 500 level class for this girl.
No, I think it's important because we all talked about the fact that we become really attached to our brands. Camille, you mentioned it in Montelobos, you know, felt part of you. Like Diageo was, I in my mind, I was Diageo. They were me, and like I worked for them, and I was so darn loyal to them. Like, and it was retarded. Like Philip used to say to me, he's like, Elaine, you don't work for them. Like they are not, like you're replaceable. Like if you leave, and he was never so right. It was heartbreaking. When I left, nobody cared. It was just like, I've been there for almost 17 years, and it was like, okay, like, I mean, a few people called and, you know, whatever, but it wasn't like, and I did the dumbest thing here about being replaceable. I replaced myself. I brought in April Wachtel. And yeah, because I'm so freaking loyal to the company. So I was like, I don't want to leave you in the lurch. And we were in the middle of a project, and I got recruited to Anheuser-Busch. That's why I was leaving, because it was like double my salary, and it was a much bigger role. I was like, I have to take this opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity to be a global manager. And I replaced myself with April, and it was like, all right. And it was like nothing ever changed. It was like she just took the ball because she's so good and just rolled with it. And I'm like, I should have let him hurt just a little. I should have let him hurt just a small bit, you know? That was dumb. That was really dumb. I mean, I'm really grateful for April, it really has helped her in and around projects. So, and she's always like, Elaine, I really appreciate the fact you did that. But yeah, that was dumb.
That's hysterical. That's hysterical.
Okay, Camille?
Yeah. Well, mine also intertwines a little bit with what Kitty said, and it's I wish that I hadn't taken things so personally when I was, you know, working directly with Montelobos, and it's sort of a lesson that now I don't. I take every opportunity of feedback as an opportunity to think more strategically and understand how I can be even better to sort of reach the goals that I'm trying to reach with the brand or the team or the company. But it really used to affect me. I really took things to heart and felt like they were a direct reflection of me. And it's really not about that. It's about so many other moving parts. And then I guess just a fun one that through ambassadorship, you learn over time, which I learned a lot from watching Charlotte, because she was so great at the balance and about getting up at 5, 6 a.m. and working out, not drinking on a school night. The last 3 tails, I learned my lesson, and I knew that I could not drink until maybe the next to last or the last night, because we had a crazy amount of events, and my energy, you know, affected my output. My levels of energy really affected the way that I did my job. So that's something that we just learn with time.
No, absolutely. It is a big one. And it's not easy because you're, especially something like Tails or BCB, you're caught up in the energy and you want to have a good time. But yeah, I've learned, and I've always tried to get my seminars scheduled like the first day. Like, put me on Wednesday, put me on Tuesday, just so I can get it done. Because until my seminars happen, I'm in bed every night by like 11 and like I'm not really, out. And I'm like, nope, got to get up early, got to get those done. And I just want to get them out of the way, like let's just get them done so I can just relax after that and have a good time. I think those are really, really wise words. Well, ladies, this was fantastic. It was so much fun getting to catch up with both of you. I hope you had fun as well. And this will stay on Facebook for the next 2 weeks, and then it lives on my Death on the Rocks website, as well as there's a YouTube channel called Celebrating Brand Ambassador. So it lives up there forever until one day. But this was great, and I really enjoyed this a lot, and I look forward to seeing both of you in person sometime soon.
Wait.
Yay!
Well, thank you so much. It was so fun. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you all day, gals.
Cheers. Cheers. All right, ladies, have a great rest of the day. Bye. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Bye. Ending now.